Hey, it's Saul with the Leatherworking Guide for the War Within, and you don't need to go into a dungeon to craft high-end gear. You're welcome, and thanks for coming! In this guide, you're going to learn how to get started with leveling and getting the hang of crafting orders. Then we'll dive into the specializations and come up with some builds. Whether you're the type that wants to advertise your skills in the city or be away from people and play the auction house, there's lots of flexibility for your playstyle. This is part of a series of profession guides, and if you haven't seen it yet, take a look at the intro that goes over all the basics. Links to that are in the upper right corner and in the video description. Please hit the like button if this was useful and share it with others. Subscribe for more casual guides and coverage, and catch me live on Twitch. I promise you that, I do okay. Leatherworking is both deep and straightforward, with easy to understand trees and lots of options. As you know already, leatherworking handles two armor types, leather and mail, ensuring armor crafters that they'll have regular work to do. At the same time, they're going to rely on a strong industry of reagent crafting, creating the components that make the gear what it is, and they'll be supporting the other products under the crafter's belt, from profession accessories to armor kits and other items. But supporting all of that will be skinning, which is obviously a good profession to pair leatherworking with. You'll need a pretty good amount of leather and chitin to level, and in the meantime, you'll collect a number of other more rare materials. All of this will let you reach skill level 60 pretty easily, and all the way to 75 if you've got lots of extra materials, but it's not a rush. Getting to 50 is all well and good. While the beer world does its thing, let's talk up patron crafting orders. This mostly replaced the idea of weekly profession quests. Instead, you'll check in at your crafting table in the main city of Dornicle, looking for computer-generated folks asking you to make stuff. Sometimes they'll provide materials, oftentimes, at least on the beta, they won't. Thanks. Completing these give important rewards like artisan acuity, which you'll use to buy recipes and trade for materials. There's also valuable knowledge points to improve your spec, and a bonus bag of random goodies like finishing reagents that improve the skill of your next craft. With two full armor specs, leatherworkers have a lot of ground to cover, but this also puts the profession at a sort of early advantage with lots of accessible recipes and thus lots of first craft bonuses to get you started in a specialization. When looking at the screen, don't be intimidated by what's being asked for. Don't even feel too discouraged if you can only fulfill a few orders. The patron order system is designed to help you, and even if you feel like you're behind on knowledge points, extra patron orders will appear like they do here on screen. So the rule of thumb is to complete what you can. Prioritize easy orders, and if you need to, use concentration and your own resources if the rewards are worth it. And going forward, this guide will assume you can reach a skill level of at least 60. Once you hit skill level 25, it's time to make a choice of what sort of leatherworker you want to be. No matter what route you take, you're not going to feel stuck, as in you won't run out of recipes offering skill ups to unlock another spec tree. And thanks to patron crafting orders, you can probably rely on the occasional epic request to get skill points in case your realm doesn't do a lot of traffic. You want to answer for yourself some very important questions though, like do you want to take part in crafting orders and trade chat, or do you want to work in mostly with the auction house, or actually are you crafting for others or just yourself? Maybe like a few friends and guildmates. Is this an alt or is it a main? Answering those questions is huge because there's a path to being a thriving leatherworker as long as you choose a spec that fits your playstyle. You'll set yourself up for failure if you're chasing what you think works best when it turns out to be more than you can handle. So let's take a look at the 4 specs. Learned Leatherworker is one part support spec that gives ingenuity and resourcefulness, but is also essential for consumable and reagent crafting. Luxurious leathers and concrete chitin are the armor specs. They're very straightforward unless you're also going for the special embellished gear, and we'll get into all that. Finally, Flawless Forts, or is it Fortes? I'm going to go with Forts. Flawless Forts reinforce the crafting of embellished gear, profession accessories, armor kits, and reagents. It's a lot. Unlike leatherworking and Dragonflight, which got a little bit messy, there are only a few builds that include crossing between different spec branches, and I'll go over those, but let's start really easy with the armor crafting builds. The layouts between mail and armor are identical, so I'm going to talk up both at once. The setup ought to look familiar, with a base trait, sub-spec, and finally specific specs for all the armor slots. Let's demonstrate how the mastery has changed from Dragonflight to War Within and go for making an epic belt. So here's the minimal path towards starting to master belts while learning an epic recipe. In fact, you're already able to make this belt at a fairly reasonable level, and with the right materials, tools, and some spec points, you can squeeze out enough skill to make this build at a quality level of 4, and then use concentration to boost it straight to a rank 5. Now, mastering this particular belt recipe doesn't require points anywhere except for these 3 nodes, and we can apply the same approach to every type of armor. Well, almost. There's lots of flexibility here because with as few points as this, you can start making high quality crafts, but it'd be kind of like having a daily cooldown on crafting this once at high quality, and that's also kind of the cool thing. It's easy to make great stuff. The mastery grind simply allows us to make it more often, for that kind of player, meaning a daily cooldown might be perfectly fine for your taste as a solo crafter, and you can start specializing into the other armor specs and craft as you go. More industrial crafters will want to spec deeper, filling up these nodes completely to eliminate the concentration cost altogether and always be able to fulfill orders, provided they work with the best materials. In a different example, this sort of crafter can specialize wide, like this, unlocking all the armor crafting recipes to have the most flexibility fulfilling orders from players or patrons. Again, they'll have to deal with the concentration cost if crafting at a high level. Many may end up wanting to specialize on a certain armor slot one at a time. On the other hand, they can focus on mastering each of the slots that happen to cover embellished gear. Maybe they want to be that sort of crafter. There are 3 sets of embellishments: Arathi, Nerubian, and Bestial. Displayed here are the slots that cover embellished gear, but choosing a slot might not be so easy. You want to consider tier set bonuses, like maybe the head or the chest slot isn't a good idea to craft for. Also, as embellished gear, there's an additional spec to master. By speccing into flawless forts and going down your desired type of embellishment, they'll learn an additional recipe and can start progressing towards fully mastering this. I'm going to talk more on the embellishments later, but since we're here, we can move on to flawless forts. We already mentioned the 3 embellishment types, so I'm going to talk up profession equipment, aka accessories. They're not as cool as like the tools with the big stats, but these do have very important skill bonuses that many crafter and gatherer specializations will want, even if it's not made at max quality. What's cool is that it's a cheap 60 points to spec for profession equipment. The twist, recipes are purchased from vendors in Dornogal and Ajkahet. There's no rep requirement that we know of, at least not yet, and it's going to be up to you to decide which recipe to pick up first if you want to go all in with accessory crafting. Leatherworkers ought to know there's going to be no shortage of reagents to obtain or make for their high-class gear, and armor kits are one of the few consumables leatherworkers can make. Fortunately though, speccing for armor kits and reagents is the same thing. Just plug points into spotless stitching, and over in the learned leatherworker tree, spec down to industrious innovations. Between these 4 nodes is mastery for both disciplines, which is huge for the crafter who just wants to do business in the auction house. You're going to find that with concentration, it's easy to start crafting these sorts of items at a high level, but if sustained crafting interests you and the demand seems to ask for it, keep plugging points into here. From here, you can either offer your services in trade chats, you can see if there are public orders, or you can do the flipping yourself. Find cheap materials to turn into something awesome to sell at a far better price. Let's go back to the learned leatherworker spec, where we learned about reagents. Here's where you'll also polish off your specialization if you choose to by maximizing your resourcefulness and ingenuity. Every build will benefit from resourcefulness, a few use ingenuity, but you'll probably want to pick these up later as you build up a favorite specialization. But don't wait too long. The earlier you pick this up, the more you'll save over the course of the expansion. We're going to circle back and talk about the embellished gear. I'm not going to pretend I know which is the best one to take because tuning can always change everything. It's up to you to take the risk if you want to decide speccing towards these. A tip though, it's probably best to first specialize in the armor crafting side of this gear, which, depending on what you want to master, include the chest, wrist, glove, waist, or foot slots. Whatever you spec into will be under the Flawless Forts tree. Again, there are 3 types. There's Arathi, Nerubian, and Bestial. Most of the recipes are found out in the world, doing dungeons and raid content, with a few recipes found by specializing. Under the Arathi build, there's a set of leather boots, mail hands, and a reagent, this blessed weapon grip. To master this reagent, you'll need to spec into spotless stitching and the same tree. The Nerubian spec is pretty interesting. This includes a leather belt and mail wrists, but also this writhing armor banding, an optional reagent that specifically enhances your other Nerubian piece. So it's kind of a must for the user to have both of these pieces to maximize the effect. Of course, you don't need to spec into both the armor and the reagent. It's not you who's deciding. Again, you just make the stuff. So it might be a good idea to only spec for the banding to sell this on the auction house, just spec for reagents and consumables on top of Nerubian. Bestial patterns are a bit more interesting in that you have 3 pieces of gear with a 2-set bonus. You probably should spec into all 3 pieces per armor type to get the most coverage, but I'd only suggest mastering one armor type at a time, as in, leather or mail, and you'll be trying to collect all the recipes while you're at it. Take a close look at these bonuses and see for yourself. Do you think it's worth going for at this stage of the expansion? You'll also eventually need to craft some tools for yourself. In the long run, multiple tools to suit your needs. For example, having a tool spec for resourcefulness and the resourcefulness enchant is ideal for patron or public crafting orders to get materials back. It's also great for soloing too, since that build doesn't demand a constant supply of concentration. If your build is based on reagents and armor kits, multicraft is more valuable than ingenuity, so you want to go for a tool with multicraft and resourcefulness as the enchant. If you intend to work the market though, going double ingenuity will give you the most stamina to make a bunch of whatever you're making. While the embellished gear can get a little bit twisty, overall leatherworking is remarkably easy to grasp once we sit down to look at what's available. Armor crafting is very straightforward, and it almost feels like cheating that, consumables and reagents practically overlap. I think that'll be a popular combination for soloists who want to take their hard-earned skins and turn them into reagents that crafters want. Hopefully it'll turn out that way, so there's a healthy supply of materials for crafters to get lots of business. I can't say this enough though, crafting has gotten a lot more accessible, and the difference between a so-called casual and a so-called hardcore crafter, it's not if you can make the best stuff, but how much of the best stuff can you make in a single sitting. Anyway, that's the guide, and I hope it was helpful. If so, please hit the like button and share this with others. Subscribe for more WoW coverage, and catch me live on Twitch. Thanks for coming, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.